Hi, I'm Stephanie Rubletz. Welcome back to my channel. This is not the video I intended to make this week, but we'll get into that. Okay, so last week I did a refashioned wrap dress and the bra wasn't working underneath it. So I was like, no worries, next week we're doing our bra tutorial. And my plan was to make a non-stretch cut bralette. But because I just don't want to take things easy on myself, I was going to try and come up with my way of drafting it so that basically you could just take your measurements and apply the formulas in the drafting procedure and draft your own non-stretch cup. So why do I want this to be based off of individual measurements and not off of a sloper? Well, here's the thing. The last couple of bralettes that I've done, I've had to do a full bust adjustment, and I've also used fabric. They were stretch bralettes. I've used fabric that had a greater percentage of stretch than what the pattern called for. And they fit, but I'm left wondering, where is it not fitting in my pattern process? So I thought if I made a bralette with a non-stretch cup, that would show me where my fitting issues are. And it has. But the extra piece of wanting to make it something that people could plug their measurements into and draft their own bralette pattern, that's where things got complicated. In the end, I was able to make, I have like, this is my practice cup sewn onto some bias tape so I could try it on. So I have one that is going to work to make a bralette. This is the first one I made that was too big. We'll get to that in a second. But after I did my drafting and my measurement, it took a lot of tweaking, which is fine, but I'm already doing that with these patterns that are created on slopers. And if you don't know, so when you draft a bra on a sloper or like a base pattern, you're never gonna get anything bigger than a B cup, which is why if you are bigger than a B cup and you make yourself a really fitted garment, you often have to do a bust adjustment because that's the shape of that garment. You can grade it up and down, but it's not gonna really give you the shape of breasts. But I was like getting down, I felt like I was so close to figuring this out, but my measurements just weren't working. And then I was like scratching my head over this, and I realized that I had a line that was 10 centimeters and I had kind of like a wavy line that went with it that was 9 centimeters. So I was like, oh, hang on. If the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, why is my wavy line 1 centimeter shorter than my straight line? Turns out my design curve, the centimeters are like plus size centimeters. They're like centimeters plus a couple mil. Now, I don't know, is this a design curve thing? I'm self-taught in sewing. I expect a centimeter to be a centimeter, an inch to be an inch. But it wasn't. It wasn't at all. So, this could be why this one was too big. Now, other than it being too big, it did turn out cute. I was really happy with it. And as I was sewing it together, I decided to use a French seam down the center cup. Now you could absolutely zigzag your seams or use a serger, but this is going down the middle of a bra cup, and those options to me just sounded itchy. So I went with the French seam. And while I was doing it in my head, I was like, oh, I better take some time to talk about French seams because I've seen people get intimidated by them. And here's the thing, if you are one of those people who is intimidated by French seams, let me just like have a moment to chill you out about it. French seams are not more difficult, they are more time consuming. French seams do not require an extra amount of skill, they do require more patience. That's it. If you just have the time, you can do it. And what you get is just this beautiful finish that is all tucked in if you're using a fabric that is like really frays a lot, or if you're using a sheer fabric that, you know, you don't want to see that zigzag stitch or you don't want to see that serging. This is such a beautiful option, and it's such an important stitch, I think, to have in your stitching repertoire. So here's the seam on the outside. It looks like a pretty basic seam, but you'll see on the inside it looks the same. And the added benefit of this is there is like this, just a teeny bit of extra structure that comes along with this. That can be really handy sometimes too. So today we are going to talk about the French seam. As for the bralette, that's still in the works in the background, but I need a bit of a timeout from that project because it's making me mad. But once I get it distilled into something that's like super easy to teach, then I will pull that out and either it'll become like a regular tutorial, or if it is going to be a bit more of a process, then maybe I'll turn it into like a webinar or something that is a bit more time consuming, and I'll probably have like accompanying printables or something like that. But that is down the road. Today we're going to work on the French seam. Now right off the top, French seams can take a little bit of extra time just based on whether or not you have enough seam allowance. So I did this French seam sewing 1/4 inch seams. So you might think, oh, a 1/2 inch seam allowance, quarter plus the quarter is a 1/2 inch. Not really, because your fabric's going to fold and that's going to eat up some additional fabric. So really to do a 1/4 inch French seam like this, you need, in my experience, about 5/8 of an inch, which a lot of patterns already come with. So if you already have that, you're smiling. But if it's a really fitted garment and you feel like that little extra itty bit is going to affect your garment, then go ahead and add that onto your seam allowance. Other than that, I'm going to move my camera up above and we're going to get into this tutorial. It's super fast, super easy. Let's get to it. All right, I've got 2 pieces of scrap fabric here that I've just got pinned along one side, and they clearly have a wrong side and a right side. So I'm going to run a 1/4 inch seam down where my pins are. To do this, I'm using a little foot that has a guide to help me get that like really tight 1/4 inch seam. If you don't have one, it's not imperative, just go slow. Here I've got my seam, and I'm going to trim my seam allowance as close to the stitches as I can without accidentally snipping my stitches. Once that's trimmed, I need to fold the seam the other way. Now this fabric's a little bit stiff, so I find actually ironing the seam open is really helpful to getting it to fold nicely. Now that's all folded, I'm going to go back and do another 1/4 inch seam. And there it is. Now when I open this up, you can see that those raw edges of that seam are completely contained within the seam. So once again, I'm going to press that open. I'm going to run a 1/4 inch top stitch to secure my seam allowance. There you have it, there's my top stitch. But the best part, look at how tidy the back is. That seam is going to be strong, it's not going to fray, there's nothing sticking out, it's perfection. I absolutely love this stitch. You can see this fabric really likes to pull apart. I'm not going to have to worry about that at all with this seam. Well, there you go. I hope that was helpful for you. I hope that if you are one of those people who felt a little bit intimidated by French seams, that we have dispelled any anxiety about them whatsoever. They are my favorite seam to do. They just are so finished and polished. They just make everything look more. They just look, they're an elevated seam. And honestly, this area in our house, my studio, is more of a multi-purpose room. So this is also like when we have more than 4 people for dinner, this is where we gotta eat dinner. This is my dining table that the camera is sitting on. So for me to have to haul out my serger and set it up, like, there's gotta be a good reason for it. And 9 times out of 10, I'd rather just French the seams. I really hope that was helpful for you. If it was, make sure that you give a comment, let me know that it was helpful, like, share, subscribe, do all the things, and I will see you next week. Oh, no, I won't see you next week, because next week I'm on vacation. I will see you in 2 weeks.